Hello and welcome to the I Still Love This Game podcast. In the wake of episodes 7 and 8 of The Last Dance, there is many topics to talk about. From the media to Gary Payton to Scottie Pippen. There's plenty to discuss. But we also have to talk about episodes 5 and 6 because I didn't get around to doing a show last week. On top of that, though, before we get into all of that, I did want to talk about The Last Dance in general. And after episodes 5 and 6, I was becoming a little bit disappointed in it because we were told that, well, at least I was expecting that this was going to be a documentary about the 98 Bulls. So I was expecting a lot more behind the scenes footage of that one specific season, which by itself could justify 10 episodes. However, we really haven't seen that much behind the scenes footage and commentary and analysis of that one season. We've seen snippets, but then it always backtracks somewhere. And it's kind of reminiscent, and probably not a coincidence either, of MJ to the Max. MJ to the Max had a similar format. If you guys have ever seen it, if you haven't seen it, my goodness, go check it out. It was an IMAX movie of Michael Jordan's last season with the Chicago Bulls. Sounds ironic. Sounds familiar, right? But what they would do is, as the Bulls were progressing throughout the season, you would see flashbacks to Jordan's childhood, to Jordan playing in college, Jordan playing on the Olympics, Jordan winning previous championships, Jordan having to go through the Pistons, Jordan breaking his foot. All that stuff was all there, but it was flashing back. So it's probably by design that this documentary has followed a similar format. But I was becoming a little bit disappointed in it, to be honest with you, because I was expecting a little bit more behind the scenes stuff. Now, I get the fascination with this. Now, maybe I'm a little bit spoiled because, or not spoiled, but a lot of this stuff isn't new to me. I mean, of course, this comes with the territory. I mean, I just wrote a book about Jordan's legacy, so I'm fully aware of the backstory. I'm fully aware of it. But this is, for example, the LaBradford Smith story. I mean, I knew about that. A lot of people knew about it. A lot of the stuff that people are laughing about now people are understanding the Hall of Fame speech, by the way. And that's why I always defended the Hall of Fame speech. That was just Jordan. That was Jordan's way of figuring out, and people figured it was a roast, it was unprofessional, it was undignified, or whatever. But that was just Jordan's way of explaining, hey, this is the competitive fire that he had inside him. And he needed to find those challenges, especially once he got to the top. Before he got to the top, those challenges of reaching the status of Bird and Magic, that was enough. He didn't really have to go after anybody. But once he was already on top of it, then he had to find the Clyde Drexlers. Then he had to find the Dan Marleys or the George Karls that we heard about. The Byron Russell, which I'm sure we'll get into as well in next week's episodes. But I was becoming a little bit disappointed with it, and there was a couple of reasons for it. I'm trying to think back to, off the top of my head, what episodes 5 and 6 was about. Obviously, they talked a little bit about the Kobe and MJ All-Star Weekend, All-Star Game performance or showdown. And that was interesting. And I guess the biggest takeaway I had from episodes 5 and 6 was how there were opportunities for Jordan and the Bulls to be defeated. But he never was. He really wasn't defeated. And let me explain that, because obviously he was defeated at times, but he was never knocked off that perch. So let's look at Kobe versus Jordan, for example. You never saw a situation where Jordan took a back seat to Kobe. Kobe was coming. It was the same way that, remember Bobby Knight was saying that Jordan was the best player that he's ever seen play, right? And that actually goes back to the Olympic trials, not the actual Olympic team, but the Olympic trials, where they would get the college players, and they would have them. They would get prepared by playing against the NBA All Stars, and it wasn't like East West. There was a team with Magic, Isaiah, and Bird on it, and Jordan, of course, led the Team USA, the Olympic team, and Jordan dominated them. So that could have been considered like the Jordan and Kobe moment. But Kobe never dominated Jordan. He played very well, don't get me wrong, especially in the All-Star game and in Chicago. He played fantastic. But you never saw that passing of the torch moment between Jordan and Kobe the way that we had seen earlier on with Jordan. Jordan may not have always won. Think back to 86. He didn't win, but there was no doubt that he was actually playing better than what Larry Bird was in that 86 playoff series. So that was interesting to me. The other passing of the torch moment that really struck me was the 93 series against the Knicks. So let me set this up for you. You guys should be fully aware of this based off what you've, been watching in the last dance. So just before the Bulls got over the Pistons hump, and what they had to do was lose continuously to the Pistons, the same way the Knicks had to lose continuously to the Bulls. And they kept getting closer and closer. The Bulls lost in a 7-game series in 1990, but they didn't have home court advantage, right? The Knicks lost in 1992 to the Bulls in a 7-game series, but they didn't have home court advantage. Then the year after that, the Bulls had home court advantage over the Pistons. They had the best record in the league, although the Knicks didn't have the best record in the league. That would go to Phoenix in 93. But when they met, the Bulls and the Knicks had the home court advantage, the same way that the Bulls had home court advantage over the Pistons. The Bulls jumped out with a 2-0 series lead over the Pistons, but all they did was win their home games. Then in 93, the Knicks won the first 2 games of that series, and would we have been surprised if we go back? Would we have really been surprised we would be now because we know about Jordan, we know the Bulls are a different beast altogether, right? But would we have been surprised if the Knicks had finished the job off and won in 93? Would we have really been shocked by that? I don't think we would have been. I mean, it sounds like heresy to say that because that's Jordan in his prime in 93. But the reality was, this is the difference that Jordan is as compared to even the greats, even the Magics and the Larrys and the Bill Russells, those guys that can influence a game and slow it down. Jordan took that to a totally different level. And you think about his entire career, what he did to Drexler, what he did in Utah. I'm sure this is going to come up as well. I'm sorry, Jordan, but I have to bring that up. Jordan's a high school friend of mine, by the way. Jordan Walker, a shout out to you. But what he did in Utah multiple times. It wasn't just Game 6 in 98 that he did this. Game 2 in 98, he also did it. Game 5, the flu game, he also did it. There was plenty of situations where a Game 6 in 97, he also did it. So there was plenty of times where Jordan and the Bulls had all the momentum going against them. And it would have been very easy for them to lose. Almost justifiable that they would have lost. And it just didn't happen. The only time it really happened was the 95 series. And thankfully, the documentary did talk about that and give the proper context associated with it. In terms of how Jordan had to change his body to be trained to play baseball, and he just wasn't in the right endurance in that situation. And also, he had 18 months away from the game. That is crazy. Think about this. There's talks that the NBA season won't come back because it won't be fair to the players because they've had to take 2 or 3 months off, right? And that's everybody. So everyone's on an equal playing field with that. Jordan, it's not like the entire NBA took 18 months off. Jordan took 18 months off, came back in, and was at least a top 3 player during that time. You could argue Shaq and Hakeem Olajuwon. Maybe David Robinson too. At least from a scoring standpoint, Jordan was right there, right? The point that I'm making with all this is what you were seeing with Jordan was not just athleticism. It wasn't just scoring. It was just instincts of the game that we have not seen since, and quite honestly prior to as well. And that includes Magic, that includes Larry Bird, that includes Bill Russell, some of the great winners in NBA history. All they wanted to do was win. And they were very intelligent players. as well. I'm not discounting that. Those were really their strengths. But Jordan combined unparalleled and unprecedented athleticism, along with incredible skills and those wonderful basketball instincts, especially later on in his career, where he just understood the game on a totally different level. He knew what he had to do, and he wasn't afraid to do it. And we'll get to that in a moment as well. And I think it was B.J. Armstrong who said it. It might have been one of the other Bulls, but he just said that, he knew how to steer momentum. He knew how to do it, even in the practices. So I was talking about, the passing of the torch moments, and a lot of historians refer to the 92 Dream Team, the practices there, as the passing of the torch moment, really, between Magic and Jordan. Of course, you could argue the 91 finals were really that moment. But that's when Magic actually realized that, he is a different player. He is on a different level. And for somebody as great as Magic Johnson, I've got him number 3 all time on my list, behind only Wilt and, of course, Jordan. But for somebody of that level to realize that and to publicly say it speaks volumes. But once again, referencing back to the Jordan and Kobe situation, you didn't see that out of Jordan. You saw Jordan, his eyes would light up with that. It didn't matter that he was nearly double Kobe's age at that time. It didn't matter to him. It never mattered to him. Anything that gave him added motivation to prove to himself that, hey, this is a challenge for me. Let's see if I can still dominate. Let's see if I can still win. And, and thinking back as well, I'm pretty sure that they talked about the Jordan and Drexler final series in 92. And I have always said that was the biggest ass-kicking I've ever seen in team sports history, Jordan to Drexler, because people talk about Shaq's dominance, and they always say when Shaq was the most dominant player of all time, because when he was the best player in the league, the distance or the difference between him and the second best player was the biggest in that we've ever seen. And I'd like to dispute that. I really would, because all you got to do is look at the 92 NBA Finals. Drexler was a runner-up in MVP voting. What Jordan did in one half of Game 1 of the NBA Finals was so bad. And keep in mind what I said about the Knicks, and also the Pistons. All this was on Chicago's home floor. So really, it's just one game that you're not expected to win if you're Portland anyway, right? And they got off to a hot start, and Jordan just turned not just that game, not just that series, not just that final series, but the entire career trajectories in a totally different... he turned a complete 180 for Drexler. Drexler was the second best player in all of basketball, the second best player in the NBA at that time. He was a runner-up in MVP voting. I cannot stress this enough to you. That's how good he actually was. And Jordan, I've never seen anything like this. He derailed Drexler, he derailed the Blazers. The Blazers were never the same. And that's something you can point out as well, or you can look back to. Every team that he went through was never the same afterwards. I'm pretty sure the only team that he really went through consistently, or that's two, Miami and the Lakers, have gone on to win championships after Jordan's retired. So you think about Utah, they haven't won titles. New York hasn't won titles. Portland hasn't won titles. Phoenix hasn't won titles. The list goes on and on and on. If you go through all of them, they all haven't won titles. Now, some of that could be said because Seattle is another one too. Well, they're not in existence, but Oklahoma is, air quotations, the Sonics now. But I guess the other side of the argument, though, is a lot of these teams in the West actually would go on to win titles. And to be fair, the Lakers did go on to win 5 of those titles, and Miami has won 3 of them. So that's kind of, nearly half of the titles that have been won since then. But regardless, the players were never the same. Karl Malone was never the same. Ewing was never the same. Drexler obviously was never the same, although he did win in Houston, but that was as a clear number 2 if not borderline number 3 at times option behind Robert Horry and, of course, Hakeem Olajuwon. Barkley never won titles afterwards. Sean Kemp, Gary Payton, they never won titles. Reggie Miller, they never won titles. All these great players were never the same after they played against Jordan. So the stranglehold that Jordan had over the league was not just a momentary one. So it wasn't like what you saw with the Celtics. Once the Celtics, they were keeping the Pistons down. And once Larry Bird retired, you didn't see, well, the Pistons were never the same afterwards. The Pistons took their opportunity to ascend and win their titles. Once the Pistons were at the top and the Bulls went past them, the Bulls went on and finished business and they won their titles. But you never saw the other side of that with Jordan. You saw teams that didn't have to face him. And he took their basketball souls, essentially. They were never the same after playing against him. And I think that's very interesting when you think about it, because, it's almost like he ripped their hearts out. Like they didn't believe in themselves anymore. Because keep in mind the level of competition. How many times do you think Charles Barkley has ever felt like he wasn't the best basketball player on the court? I can tell you, leading up to 93, he never felt that, ever in his life. And then after 93, he was never the same because he realized that he wasn't the best. It was like that moment of humility took away a certain edge that a lot of these players had. The other thing that I got to talk about was the politics aspect of it. And it's interesting because even in this documentary, I still get the feeling that they're trying to smear Jordan's name a little bit. And it might be just by applying the context of what the media was trying to do back then when they were trying to smear his name. And the political statement, it wasn't even a political statement. Like that's the problem. There's far too much sensitivity when it comes to this kind of stuff. Because a lot of grown men in that situation, they're looking for validation from celebrities. You see this a hell of a lot more than probably what you did in the 90s, right? Especially with Twitter and all that stuff. But what difference does it make if Jordan endorses somebody or if he doesn't? Like, why do we need celebrities to say, oh yeah, I endorse that person? Do you really, I don't understand this follower logic. That, I tell you right now, if somebody tells me, hey, I endorse that person, I'll be like, congratulations, tell me why, and I'll listen to it. But I'm not going to say, well, I don't understand that, so because you've endorsed him, then I'm going to go vote for that person. That, to me, is kind of silly. And I think the situation that they were talking about with the Republicans buy sneakers too, well, here's a newsflash, they do. As do Democrats. Can you imagine the uproar if the shoe was, for lack of a better term, the shoe was on the other foot, and we were talking about Tom Brady, and Tom Brady said something along the lines of, like, he refused to endorse a Republican because he said, well, Democrats buy footballs as well, or they buy jerseys as well, or whatever. There would be such a backlash towards it. What do you mean? Of course we do. What a racist comment. They would be up in arms with that. Jordan was actually just, here's a newsflash for you. It's possible that he just doesn't care about politics. And just because you care about politics doesn't mean that he has to care about politics. If you're disappointed over that, you've got much bigger insecurity problems than whether your favorite basketball player, or maybe the most or the best basketball player of all time, endorses who you endorse. You should endorse that regardless. You should endorse that individual regardless, and believe in that individual regardless of what Michael Jordan says or whoever else. That should be totally irrelevant. It's just disappointing that becomes such a focal point. And Jordan said something very poignant. He said, it's never enough. It's never enough. It's never going to be enough for everybody. And it's crazy to me that, we've talked about social media a lot and the bubbles that have been created by social media. And they make, and you've just got these echo chambers. But it looks like, and I'll get to the, episodes 7 and 8 in a second, because this is even bigger for these episodes. But back then, it looked like it was, you had the media and you had certain echo chambers and bubbles within the media back then that haven't let it go with Jordan. They were looking for something to tear him down. Oh, he disagrees with me politically. He's a sellout. He only cares about business. He's a sellout. No, maybe that's just what his passions are. Or maybe he is deeply political and he realizes that he shouldn't be influencing other people to vote just because they are a fan of his basketball game. Which is a hell of a deep thing to think about, which it wouldn't surprise me if he actually has that mentality. It really wouldn't. I just find it incredible that they were talking about how he would never be considered on the same lines as Muhammad Ali or whatever. Like, they were attacking him for that just because they disagreed with him. And that is so disappointing. People will disagree with you. But at the same, but the purpose of conversation, the purpose of having opinions isn't to quote unquote win an argument. You win an argument by learning from each other, even if you disagree with them. So Jordan could have a particular stance, but if you can't handle that, if you can't handle somebody having a different opinion to you, that is actually the literal definition of being a bigot, which is a term that gets thrown around way too loosely and often incorrectly. So I just, that annoyed me a bit. It annoyed me that was the mentality back then, because we've often been thrown, oh, you millennials, you're on social media, you don't know how to have conversations. It looks like it was fairly prevalent in the 90s as well. The other thing as well that I sort of, half remember was Kukoc and Rodman, the similarities. So when Kukoc came onto the Bulls, he had to prove himself. Not based off anything that he had done, but mainly because of Krause. And Rodman also had to come onto, but for very different reasons, had to prove himself that he was, willing to fit into the team dynamic as well. But that was for very different reasons. But regardless, they really had to prove themselves. I think Toni Kukoc is very underrated in what he was able to provide for his team in that second three-peat. And the other thing I wanted to mention was the 62,000 people that went to the game in Atlanta. Now, I remember reading about this. I believe this was for there was some kind of natural disaster in Atlanta, and they used that to fundraise money for the victims of it. This is before the days of GoFundMe, by the way. And that blew my mind, because this is a regular season game between the Atlanta Hawks and the Chicago Bulls. 62,000 people went to that game. And I cannot emphasize this enough, but Atlanta is not a basketball town. It's definitely not an NBA town. That is a football and baseball city. And for them to get 62,000 people into a regular season game, it shows just how popular and how big of a reach this guy actually had. It's ridiculous to me to actually try to put that into words. Because if you go to a game now, obviously you can't now, but earlier on in this season, unless if it's in LA, you're not getting a tenth of that. You go to a Pistons game, you go to a Pacers game, you'll be lucky to get 10,000 people in the stands. And he got 62 in a city that doesn't even care about basketball. Even though they were a playoff team with Mutombo and everything. That's besides the point. They were never considered a basketball city. And, maybe some cities are looking back at that as a missed opportunity, for that last season to actually put some of those games and relocate some of those games into some football stadiums so they could actually make a little bit more money. Because I guarantee you, if you could do that in Atlanta, imagine what you could have done in Indianapolis or, San Antonio or Houston or wherever. You could have really, really made some money that way. But at the end of the day, it showed how untouchable this guy was. And there was another thing before we get into episode 7 or 8 that really resonated with me was you saw in some of the early episodes how defensive Jordan was getting, or not defensive, he was probably just getting frustrated with answering the same question over and over and over again about his future. And when Krause made the comments that, hey, Jackson's not coming back, so pretty much this is definitely it. There is no way Jackson is coming back. And then it seemed like the weight was lifted off Jordan's shoulders, and he really embraced the last opportunities to be playing. But this was not a farewell tour by any stretch of the imagination. He wanted to go out on his own terms. And you saw things like, wearing those shoes in Madison Square Garden. He was, he understood the history of the game and the significance of the game. And he understood that what he was embarking on would, one way or another, really shape and identify his history. It would have been interesting, especially what we know, like, I already knew this, but as if the larger public now knows about, how he hated to lose. And you saw what happened after he lost to Orlando. You saw what happened after they were losing to the Pistons. Would have been interesting to see what would have happened had they had lost to either Indiana or Utah in the NBA Finals in 1998. Would he have gone to the Knicks? Would he have gone to LA? Would he have gone to one of those other teams to try and play? Would the lockout have happened? There's a lot of questions and variables that go into this, because I don't think he would have been willing to just ride off into the sunset, especially knowing his competitive nature at that time. It was hard enough, him walking away, and of course, he didn't stay away because he did come back and play with the Wizards. But it was hard enough for him to walk away when he was on top. How well would it have sat with him if he wasn't on top, if he had lost that Game 7 to the Pacers? Which I'm sure we're going to get next week's episode will be heavily about the Utah Jazz and the Indiana Pacers. But let's talk about episode 7 and 8. And I said I was a little bit disappointed with 5 and 6 and even 3 and 4. The episodes. It wasn't as good as what, episodes 1 and 2 were. But episodes 7 and 8 were maybe some of the best television I've seen in a long, long, long time. It was right up there. And as I said before, I am a seasoned NBA historian. I know this stuff. But there was some stuff there that was very, very shocking to me. And I don't know how I'm actually going to start by this, but I'm going to be talking about James Jordan, and the way the media handled this was absolutely disgraceful. See, this was a little bit before my time, so I always thought that these rumors, disgusting rumors, by the way, were of Jordan and his gambling being somehow connected to James Jordan's death. That was just, internet trolls, LeBron James fans, those, jealous sort of people trying to, just, idiots online, right? Just, trying to stir up enough attention. I had no idea that these are quote unquote professionals doing this, that were actually causing this. People in the New York Times, stuff like that. And when you think about this, when you see, how much this affected MJ, you see, where he was, still tearing up to this day. We're talking about 25 years later. He's still getting upset talking about his father. And I try not to curse on this show. I really do, because I do know some kids listen to this. But these motherfuckers, man, this is, what a cruel thing. What an absolute cruel and diabolical thing to say, to imply that he was somehow at fault for his father being murdered. I hope that they can live with themselves knowing that they did that, because you think about this guy he did nothing wrong to those people. You talk about toxic relationships and stuff like that. The media, oh my God, this is a new level of bastardry from the media. It really was. Because he had just lost his father. he was trying to deal with that. As Ahmad Rashad said, he didn't even know how to, like, I'm sure he knew how to tie his own tie, but he was just overwhelmed by the situation. And these pricks started writing things in newspapers straight up implying, and you know as well as I do that, you know, I was talking about this a little bit before about how there's a lot of following mentality. I don't know what it was like back then, but if you write something like that now, yeah, 60-70% of the people might not believe it, but 30% might. That is disgraceful to think that they were actually... That is one of the worst things you could do to somebody. Imagine that. Imagine for a second you've just lost your father and you're very close to him. He's your best friend as well as your father. And you're only 30 years old. And yet it's now publicized, publicly questioned, whether you are responsible for that. There are very few things that piss me off like that, but I was shocked when I saw that, and I am surprised that he ever forgave anyone in the media for that, even if they weren't associated with that or attached to that, because that is unbelievable. I know I've said unbelievable a few times, but you think, like, that is just, how could you do that? You know, I called them motherfuckers before. I don't even think that is fair. Because that is... There are certain people... You know what? They say that Father Time is undefeated. Well, Karma has a pretty good track record as well. And those people that did that, you know, I sometimes in life you get what you deserve, and that is disgusting, absolutely disgusting. And I hope that if they have children themselves, that those children will grow up and they will read that stuff, and they will say, why did you write that? And they will have to sit down with their children and explain to them why they would write something like that, because you are accountable for your actions. Unbelievable. Absolutely unbelievable. And I'm sorry for the language, but holy shit. Moving on from that, and to see that Jordan actually moved to tears about when he was talking about leadership and the price of leadership and the price of winning. And I couldn't help but think, at that point, the Scottie Pippen thing and Scottie Pippen's leadership. And everyone praises Pippen for being, you know, the nice guy, the good cop, all that other stuff. But you think about how he delayed surgery intentionally on his foot, and that ended up nearly derailing the Bulls, right? His teammates. You think about what he did by refusing to go back out onto the court at that particular time. And even, you know, a lot of people don't remember this, but he was actually hoping publicly, he was actually trying to get traded from the Bulls just prior to Jordan returning. So Pippen, as much as I respect him, but for all those people that said that Pippen was the real leader of that Bulls, they're fools. They're absolute idiots. Because, you know, obviously I knew about the, you know, him refusing to go back out on the court, but he reminds me a lot of LeBron in that way. He, you know, he's a nice guy sort of thing in practice, and teammates, quote unquote, love him or whatever. But Jordan wanted to win. And everyone could see what Jordan wanted. You know, he wanted to win, and he knew what the formula of success was. And he was going to test his teammates to see what they were made of. If they couldn't handle him, then they weren't going to be able to handle the Pacers or the Utah Jazz or the Knicks or whoever was going to be standing in their way. He wanted to toughen them up. He was essentially, you know, an assistant coach on that team with Phil Jackson, because he was the one that was actually developing and mentoring those a lot of those players that had come in. I understand that. I truly do. And this is not to take shots at Pippen. This is just the reality of it. He has to live with his legacy too. And when he gets back up and says that he wouldn't change Like, he still would sit on the bench. That's disappointing. That is very disappointing to hear from Pip, because, you know, they were talking about Bill Cartwright, and that was Bill Cartwright's last run. That was John Paxson's last run. Horace Grant's last tenure on the Bulls as well. And Pippen, that was a very selfish act, as was the ankle surgery, or the foot surgery in 97. And, you know, there's a lot of jealousy that's been going around. And at the end of the day, without Jordan, you know, yes, they would still be in the NBA, but would we be talking about Horace Grant? Would we be still talking about, you know, some of these players that have shown bitterness towards Jordan? And I don't think Horace Grant's really been all that bitter, to be honest with you. But the reality of it, without Jordan pushing these guys, we wouldn't be talking about Steve Kerr. We wouldn't be talking about Judd Butcher or Scott Burrell or Luke Longley or any of those guys. Tony Kukoc probably either. They would still have made the NBA, obviously, but we wouldn't be talking about them. So for all the negatives that people want to say, oh, Jordan was too tough on him, no, he wasn't. He got the best out of them. They should be thanking him. They really should. And not just for the championships, but from the fact that he really pushed them to the next level. He improved them. The same way you should thank your coach, you should thank your teacher, you should thank your parents whenever they push you. Because, yeah, it might suck at that time and they may be challenging you, but at the end of the day, you usually get better because of it. So, you know, they owe a debt of gratitude to Jordan. And I understand, but to hear Jordan, you know, get emotional when he was talking about, like, you know, I had to do this. It makes me wonder if he regrets any of it when he looks back at some of this stuff. It really does make me wonder. And now he's got nothing to be ashamed of, because look at the results. And you play the game to win. I mean, you look at Charles Barkley, you look at Karl Malone, you look at Reggie Miller, you look at these guys that he denied championships to. They would give anything to say that they had beaten Jordan. So Jordan shouldn't be held to a different standard for being able to be successful in that situation. So it was an interesting thing, though. And I wonder how much he actually passed on to Kobe about this. Like, how to be a leader, how to be ruthless. Because Kobe was a very different person once he retired, as opposed to when he was going for championships. I don't know if we'll ever get that answer now, which is also really unfortunate. The other thing I want to talk about is Gary Payton. I did get a few emails, people asking me what I thought about Jordan laughing at Gary Payton. I'm a big Gary Payton fan. I make no apologies for that. If I'm picking my 90s team of all time, Payton is on it with Jordan. That's a hell of a defensive backcourt, by the way, when you think about it. And that's rounded out with Pippen, Karl Malone, and Hakeem Olajuwon. Good luck scoring on that team, right? But the reality of it was, I had always given Gary Payton a lot of credit for having the most success that we've ever seen against Jordan in a big situation, in a big moment, in a big playoff series, final series. And I might need to reconsider that. I don't want to fall into the trap and say that Jordan was sabotaging the game so they could win it, or the Bulls was sabotaging the game so they could win it on Father's Day. I don't think that was the case at all. But when you look at the success that Jordan had prior to Game 4 of that series, and then after that series, so we're talking from 1990 up to Game 4 of 96, and then from, of Game 4 of 96, and then from 97 to 98, we saw Jordan absolutely have his way against Payton and the Sonics. So it's not a situation where, Payton figured it out and they had no answer to it. Because think about this. It wasn't just Jordan that was struggling. It was also Scottie Pippen. Tony Kukoc didn't have a great series. Ron Harper was injured. So where's the scoring coming from? Steve Kerr, Luke Longley. So if they were able to really control, remember the thing about pace and understanding the situation in terms of pacing and all that, the if they really had figured out Jordan, they would have won the series, even if they were down 3-0. And we had seen Payton switch up on Jordan plenty of times prior to Game 4, and he was attempting to be physical with him. He wasn't physical with him for the entire game because still Hersey Hawkins and Vincent Askew were on him a lot in that series. But when you saw Payton on Jordan, it's not like Payton had it all figured out. That's just, there's a good chance, and I don't want to diminish this because I am a huge Gary Payton fan, but there's a good chance that there's some truth to this, that Jordan was just battling inner demons and his own subconscious when he was struggling games 4, 5, and 6 against the Sonics. So should he have laughed at Gary Payton? Sure, why not? Why not? I mean, it's a different... Is it disrespectful? Maybe. But how many times have we seen... like, this is a man's game. Like, women play it too, but there's a difference between male energy and female energy, all right? And that's not always... diagnosed to males and females. So when I say there's male energy to it, it means there's actual, sensitivities and emotions don't mean anything. Just because you may hurt someone's feeling, like, okay, so what? Jordan laughed at what Gary Payton was saying. What was Gary Payton saying? Was that disrespectful? What he was saying? To a point, he was saying that he was shut down Jordan. He really didn't. They still lost the series. And if that's like the black eye on Jordan's finals record, think about that for a second. They still won. He was still finals MVP. And he still scored 28 for the series. He shot pretty bad, right? But we've seen other players lose with worse numbers, and they've been giving passes for it. So we're going to hold Jordan, we're going to hold his feet to the fire for winning? That's crazy to me. It's silly to even entertain that thought, that was a black mark. You can talk about the series against Orlando. You can talk about his Wizard years. You can talk about those being his black marks, which even then, or his black eyes. You can talk about that as being... But then you've got to apply context to all those two. Like, he just came back from 18 months away from baseball. And then the Wizard years, he was out there by himself in Washington at the age of 40. I mean, these are legitimate pieces of context that need to be applied. But I'm not saying he was a perfect basketball player. Nobody's perfect, and that kind of diminishes what he was doing out there on the court. But at the same time, what he did do was at a level that we have never seen before or since. And I'm really looking forward to how this finishes up. Obviously, they're going to talk about the Jazz. They'll flash back to the 97 series, 97 finals, which was a great series. That might have been the closest that any team has come to derailing the Chicago Bulls, was that 97 Utah Jazz team. And they came pretty damn close in 98 as well. And the Pacers were right there as that was a hell of a series too. So we've got some good things to finish up on. I'm not too sure what else they're going to really bring up. Maybe they'll surprise us. But it's been the most... I'm not sure. I don't know if I'm the right person to answer this either. But my mum, who doesn't care for sports at all, even sports that I played, like, she couldn't care less watching my rugby games, right? And I love her to death. Do not misinterpret that. But she was not the biggest fan of going to sports. She's a fan of this series. What does that tell you? Like, that this is something special. The same way that I mentioned before about what Jordan's reach was individually in Atlanta, getting all those people to the Georgia Dome. This series might be the best documentary series that we have seen ever. Outside of course, World War II documentaries and things like that. This is, and it shows that there is, when you think about it, when they were talking about how Jordan was losing popularity because of his stance or his neutrality when it came to political issues, which is not a bad thing, by the way. That's a good thing. You'd be surprised how many people my age have the exact same stance. They will say, I do not want to talk about politics. Don't bring it up with me. Jordan did the exact same thing. And yet he was getting killed with it because a bunch of sensitive men, because they were, grown adults, couldn't handle that he wasn't, jumping up and down for what they perceived to be important causes. What's he meant to do? Like, what did you expect him to be? One of these people that just jumps on a cause without knowing it? And what happens if he's wrong then? How's he going to walk that back? Anyway, I don't want to get too much into that, but the point that I wanted to make is the public loved him back then. It was the media may have hated him, and a good argument could be made that is the case. Especially when you look at those comments about his father, and even the baseball comment too. Like, who the hell do they think they are to say that he disgraced baseball? Why? Because you're covering it? You're the ones really that was disgraced. He just wanted to go play. He wasn't, giving you guys tip-offs. He just wanted to, that was his sabbatical. And yet, you were the ones covering it. You were the ones giving it all the attention. Talk about some serious projection. I remember I said the media is like that toxic relationship that you just need to get away from. That's really what they were. They were so desperate to get dirt on this guy that they would stoop to nothing. There's no low they wouldn't go to try to get some kind of dirt on him, including what I mentioned about what they said about him and his father. Unbelievable. I'm glad they mentioned that. I'm glad that this documentary went into that. The other thing as well, of course, they did, dispel the myth that Jordan was suspended 18 months for the gambling. Why? Why would they do that? Why would they do that? The NBA, the biggest black eye the NBA has ever had was the Ron Artest Malice in the Palace situation. And even then, Ron Artest was only suspended for the rest of the season and the playoffs. Why would they suspend the greatest player, the greatest money maker? And it went far beyond the Chicago Bulls. It went far beyond Chicago. It went far beyond all the other NBA teams. He was a cash cow for the entire American economy. And you're telling me that they would suspend him over something that he didn't even do illegal? That wasn't even illegal? For gambling on golf games that he was playing in? Are you kidding me? That is one of the dumbest things. And once again, it shows how, and this is going to come across as incredibly biased, but just weigh it up. If this guy was if he was a jerk, if he was, if he wasn't a good human being, it would have been very easy to find dirt on him. And they couldn't find any dirt on him. So they had to resort to those desperate measures and tactics. And I can see why he wanted to walk away from the game and why he did. I think the love of the game was always strong with him. I mean, I've seen footage of him after he retired in 99, and he's tearing up some Chicago Bulls rookie because, why not? Why not? Why else would he come back to play for the Wizards? Because he loved the game. But I don't think anybody would have loved that kind of scrutiny that he was under. And it's just disappointing because I don't think he's done I'm not saying he's perfect, but I don't think he's done a whole lot wrong. And for him to be attacked like that, just so the media can feel vindicated and can use him in whatever, diabolical control scheme that they have over the public, is an absolute disgrace. And at the end of the day, and this is going to sound really conceited, but at the end of the day, you might say that, well, aren't you attacking the media? Here's the difference. I created this podcast on my own, okay? I've written 2 books about the NBA. Self-published. I answer to no one. These shows average over 10,000 downloads per episode. My audience might not be as big as what you see on ESPN and Fox and all that, but I answer to no one. I do not go after anyone's agenda. I do not follow anyone's agenda. I don't have to worry about that crap. And I built this by myself. I answer to absolutely no one. And that allows me to call people out when they deserve to be called out. And the media, that was unforgivable what they did. And it would be very easy for me to go back and edit it. I am not editing it because that was an absolute disgrace. And it may have been 25 years ago. I do not care. If we are going to blast everybody, if Jordan's going to get blasted for saying Republicans buy shoes too or sneakers too, why the hell isn't the media being blasted for what they did? Why is that being, covered, not covered up, but accepted? I'm going to go before I get too angry again. Episodes 9 and 10 next week. I'm looking forward to this. This has been a fantastic documentary because I sort of was a little bit disappointed, maybe because it was such a good start for episodes 1 and 2. A little bit disappointed in the last couple of weeks. But 7 and 8 was amongst the best television that I've seen ever. I hope you guys enjoyed the episode. I'll catch you guys next week. Thank you.